Tomorrow we're moving into your house. No excuses. The words dropped like stone across the dinner table. My sister smirked. Her boyfriend nodded, smug and certain. I set down my fork, pulse steady, smile sharper. My name is Brenda Foster, 30 years old. I built a tech startup from coffee, code, and grit. I traded sleep and years for something that was mine. They thought success meant I'd carry them forever. They were wrong. Stick around. What happened next burned their plan to ashes. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from. They expected shelter. I gave them a price tag. Greenville looked gentle. Our house did not. Inside, love bent toward my sister. I learned to live in corners. She got private school and praise. I got rules and reminders. They called her gifted, even with C's. They called me reliable, even when breaking. A red convertible appeared for her birthday. I walked to class with secondhand books. They called it an investment in creativity. They called mine learning to be tough. She borrowed my babysitting money, never returned it. When I asked, she laughed. "You're stingy, Brenda," she said. My parents nodded like judges. I fixed leaks while they attended openings. I tutored weekends to cover fees. She posted rooftops and gelato and new shoes. I posted grades and shifts and silence. London called with a partial scholarship. Then the hospital called with a bill. "Your sister's too young to help," they said. "We need you this time." I gave up the ticket and dream. I rang groceries under humming lights. They thanked me once, then praised her painting. At school, I stopped auditioning for approval. I opened a secret savings account. I studied until numbers steadied me. I worked until mornings blurred into headlights. Independence wasn't a choice. It was survival with receipts. Graduation came with aching feet. Hers came with a catered party. They danced. I planned an exit. Invisible daughters learned to map doorways. When they finally toured my startup, they smiled strangely. Not pride. Calculation, like appraising a couch. "How much are your shares worth?" "Family helps family, right?" The sentence bruised more than chores. Help meant me. Family meant theirs. I drove home counting streetlights, counting sacrifices. I kept tally the way accountants breathe. Have you ever faced something like this? Tell me in the comments. Some nights I heard their words echo. "You're strong. You'll manage. She needs support." Strength became the reason love arrived last. I wasn't their daughter. I was the plan they budgeted for. I built my future from leftovers and late shifts. Mornings smelled like diner coffee and bus exhaust. Nights hummed with code, bugs, and blue light. 5 hours of sleep felt like a luxury. At campus, I chased problems like they owed me money. Spreadsheets at dawn. Data structures at dusk. I didn't glow, I ground. That's when I met Daniel. He fixed laptops for gas money and textbooks. He understood the math of survival. Cheap tacos, shared earbuds, deadlines like storm sirens. He never called me stubborn. He called me relentless and meant it kindly. Healthcare tech hooked me on a rainy week. Remote monitoring, quiet dashboards, real lives behind numbers. I interned at a scrappy Greenville startup. Secondhand chairs, flickering lights, ridiculous dreams. I scraped together $2,000 in tips. I invested like it was bail money. If it failed, at least I tried. We built ugly prototypes that actually worked. We bribed testers with pizza and patience. 10,000 users arrived like a rumor. A local hospital signed a pilot. I graduated to full-time at a wobbly desk. Intern to junior. Junior to lead. Lead to equity. Not luck, ledger. Not miracle. Math. At 27, I bought a small apartment. 1 bedroom. A window with morning courage. Sofa from Craigslist, joy brand new. No one's name on the deed but mine. When my family toured the office, smiles tilted wrong. They weren't admiring. They were measuring. How big is the valuation now? How much are your shares worth? Family helps family, remember? Warm words, cold hands, and moving targets. That night, Daniel watched me pace grooves. "It isn't pride," he said, "it's procurement." The word landed like a gavel. Not daughter. Supply chain. Aunt Carol called with the missing column. "Your parents are 50,000 in credit cards," she whispered. "Loft rent, trips, Lori's studio fees, Paris again." I pressed the phone to my eyes. It smelled like pennies and rain. Then I heard my father in the hallway. He thought I'd left already. "Brenda's place is big," he told someone. "We'll move in, save rent. She can chip in more. It's only fair." Fair felt like swallowing a nail. I opened my laptop and counted years. Babysitting money that never returned. Scholarships surrendered to hospital bills. Leaky sinks, closed tabs, closed doors. I could build value. I could also build walls. I met Patrick, a calm, careful lawyer. We spoke in contingencies and fire breaks. We mapped the cleanest, tightest exit. Transfer my stake. Lock the proceeds. 860,000. Paper armor. A future with gates. If you've been through this, you're not alone. Love without boundaries is a siphon with lace. I signed the first documents with steady hands. I slept that night like a switched-off server. Morning would bring their demand and my reply. They thought I was a faucet. I was building a valve. Saturday night smelled of garlic and tension at Magnolia's Bistro. Candlelight flickered across polished menus, but my family's eyes gleamed sharper. Daniel sat beside me, steady as a handrail. Aunt Carol watched from the end, lips pressed tight. My father leaned forward, voice smooth with certainty. Brenda, we've decided. Tomorrow we're moving into your apartment. My mother's smile curled. It's what families do. No excuses. Lori swiped her phone, smirked, and nodded like royalty. Brian twirled pasta, already tasting the free rent. I set down my fork and folded my napkin. My pulse beat slow like a countdown. That's fine, I said calmly. Just bring 860,000. The table froze. Glasses halfway. Forks arrested midair. My father's jaw stiffened, eyes wide. My mother blinked, smile collapsing. Lori dropped her phone. Brian's fork clattered. They hadn't expected resistance. They had expected my silence, my compliance. Lori recovered first, voice sharp and poisonous. You're selfish, Brenda. Always hoarding, always jealous. Brian sneered. What, you think you're better than us? Their venom slithered across the table, familiar and stale. My father leaned closer, voice cold. You're turning your back on family. Everyone will hear about this. My mother dabbed at tears that weren't there. After everything we sacrificed for you, she whispered. Sacrifices? I remembered London fading into grocery aisles. Babysitting money borrowed, never returned. Hospital bills signed in my name. While she danced under confetti, I counted coins. I met their stares and didn't blink. You mean the sacrifices I made, I said. I'm done being your safety net. Daniel's hand slid into mine, solid and warm. Aunt Carol nodded slowly, pride softening her features. The walls of that restaurant shifted. For once, they weren't towering over me. I was looking them in the eye. Lori muttered. Ungrateful. My mother sniffled louder, performance rising. My father's glare promised thunder. But thunder is only noise without lightning. And I held the strike. They thought they could claim my home. They thought entitlement was inheritance. But I had already closed the door, already signed the papers, already locked the vault. The silence at that table tasted sweet. It tasted like steel, like survival, like freedom. They wanted walls. I gave them a price, and I didn't flinch. That night I stopped being their fallback, and became their reckoning. The storm hit Monday before coffee cooled. Lori posted tears and captions like sharpened knives. Brenda abandoned family, she wrote. Greedy tech girl won't help her parents. Comments stacked like wet newspapers. Old classmates shared, then judged, then unfriended. I didn't reply. Feeding fires is still feeding. By noon, Aunt Carol texted screenshots. Let it burn out, she advised. Truth doesn't need gasoline. I muted the world and opened work. Then my lobby erupted. Where's Brenda? My father boomed, red and shaking. My mother trailed, waving arms, voice high with accusation. We deserve our share of this. Keyboards stilled, heads rose in waves. Daniel stood, calm as a raincoat. Not here, I said, stepping forward. This is a workplace. Leave now. They escalated. I did not. Security walked them out, my mother wailing. You'll regret this, Brenda, echoed down the corridor. My cheeks burned, but my spine didn't. I booked a conference room and called Patrick. Documents are airtight, he confirmed, flipping metaphorical pages. No basis for any claim. Relief arrived like a chair finally offered. I exhaled and called Sharon. Keep moving, she said, crisp and certain. We ship the beta Friday, eyes forward. That night, I blocked their numbers. Silence didn't feel empty. It felt like oxygen rediscovered. I slept without checking doors twice. Morning brought collateral gossip and fewer allies. That's how pruning works. What falls wasn't rooted. What stays is strong. Aunt Carol called with the ledger of consequences. Second mortgage. New furniture. Another trip. They're drowning, and still blaming you, she said. Guilt tried the handle. The door was locked. We sprinted on the product. Sharon hammered timelines. I refactored the hardest parts. Daniel brought tacos and kindness, left judgment outside. Our tiny team found momentum like wind. Hospitals asked for demos. Clinics asked for pilots. We hired 3 developers with hungry hearts. Meanwhile, Lori's story fractured. Her boyfriend left after a money war. Posts shifted from glitz to quiet corners. My parents sold the house I grew up in. A retirement apartment replaced nostalgia with linoleum. They still grumbled, Aunt Carol said. But even thunder gets tired. I kept receipts, not resentment. I kept boundaries like guardrails in rain. When doubt whispered at midnight, I answered with math. Years carried, bills paid, dreams surrendered. A single dinner didn't start this. A single decision finally ended it. If you've faced public shaming wrapped in family, I see you. Tell me in the comments, you're not alone here. Some of us learn late. All of us can learn. I didn't choose cruelty. I chose clarity and a locked gate. Not to keep love out, to keep my life intact. I cut the rope and built a bridge only I can lower. 6 months later, the noise finally dimmed. We married in the park by the river. Aunt Carol cried softly. I didn't. Relief feels different than grief. Our apartment smelled like cardboard and new plans. Daniel hung photos with patient hands. We set rules for our future. Honesty first. Boundaries second. Everything else can wait its turn. With Sharon, I rebuilt on clearer ground. We shipped the mental wellness upgrade on schedule. Clinics signed, hospitals called, and users stayed. Success didn't feel like armor now. It felt like breath. I invested wisely, not for approval. No secret lifelines. No emergency transfers to keep chaos pretty. Money followed purpose, not pressure. Aunt Carol kept the family weather report. Lori moved into a studio, clocked reliable hours. Her feed turned human. Coffee mugs, sunsets, not trophies. Brian vanished like a bad caption. My parents sold the brick house and downsized. Linoleum floors, simpler meals, shorter stories. They still muttered my name sometimes, Carol said. But even thunder learns to rain itself out. On quiet nights, I walked the neighborhood loop. I counted porch lights instead of old debts. Freedom wasn't fireworks, it was the steady hum. Doors that closed and stayed closed. Forgiveness arrived like cautious weather. Not a parade, not an eraser. A boundary held, and a heart unclenched. I didn't owe them payment for peace. If you've been through this, you're not alone. Have you ever faced something like this? Tell me in the comments. We can learn new ways to love. Here's what I know now. Strength isn't the reason you should be punished. Generosity without limits turns holy water to flood. Love without respect becomes a leash. Choose the gate, choose the key. Choose yourself without apology. I didn't abandon my family. I abandoned the role they wrote for me. I kept the part where I deserve air. I chose boundaries. And finally stepped into a life that fits. Before saying goodbye, if this story touched your heart, please give it a like. And share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Don't forget to subscribe for more true family betrayal stories. That reminds us we are stronger than we think.
I was rinsing out my coffee cup when the text came in. Hi, honey. We've been talking and we want a peaceful Thanksgiving this year just with Taryn's family. Maybe you could sit this one out. We need space. My thumb hovered over the screen. A moment passed, then another. I didn't scroll, didn't reread, didn't call. I typed one word. Enjoy. Then I set the phone face down on the counter and finished drying the mug like nothing had happened. But everything had. For 34 years, I had played the role eldest daughter steady performer, the one who never needed to be asked. I showed up when my parents were overwhelmed. I showed up when my sister forgot things. I showed up even when I wasn't invited, and I made it easier for everyone to forget that I existed on the periphery. But this wasn't forgetfulness. This was precision. This was the line. My hands were steady, but I could feel the tremble starting in my spine, the slow unfurling of disbelief that spreads like cold. Not anger, not yet. Just the weight of being made optional. I sat at the edge of my bed, knees tucked close, the phone still blank on the nightstand. I should have cried. Instead, I remembered. Last Thanksgiving, I'd brought a bottle of wine aged exactly the same number of years as my latest promotion. I thought it was symbolic, thought it meant something. I'd announced the news between the turkey and the green beans, proud of how far I'd come. Dad nodded absently. Mom smiled and said, "That's wonderful, sweetie. By the way, did I tell you Taryn's organizing the school bake sale with gluten-free options?" Everyone clapped. I watched them toast my sister with cider while my own news dried on the tablecloth like spilled gravy. So no, this year I wouldn't be there. I reached for my laptop and opened a folder I hadn't touched in weeks, villa planning. A quiet thrill stirred somewhere beneath the hurt, not because they cut me out, but because now, finally, I could choose what to do with the space they left behind. The silence after my text wasn't new. It was just louder now that I'd stopped mistaking it for peace. I didn't respond again, didn't check to see if they'd followed up. They hadn't. Instead, I opened old files, ones not stored on a laptop but in memory. And once I started, I couldn't stop. I thought about freshman year of college when I worked 3 part-time jobs to cover books and rent. I'd call home between shifts bone-tired but proud. Mom would tell me I was so resilient, then pivot to Taryn's chemistry class anxiety or her upcoming trip to Coachella. By junior year, I'd saved enough for a used Toyota Corolla. I was giddy when I drove it home for spring break. A week later, they gave Taryn a brand new hatchback for her birthday. She needs something reliable for commuting, Dad said, handing over the keys like it was obvious. Every time I voiced the imbalance, Mom would tilt her head and say, "But Coralie, you're so capable. Taryn needs a little more help." That word capable wasn't a compliment. It was a sedative, a way to tuck me quietly into the background and focus the spotlight where it had always lived. Holidays became background noise. I'd show up gifts and hand updates rehearsed. They'd ask about my job just long enough to bridge the conversation to Taryn's Etsy side hustle or her daughter's pre-K piano recital. One year, I was seated at the far end of the table across from the neighbor's college-aged son. Mom said it was just logistics. And yet I kept showing up. Part loyalty, part reflex. The only person who ever noticed the imbalance out loud was Aunt Judith, my mother's older sister. She came to visit after I graduated. We sat on the porch watching Taryn show off her new earrings to a cluster of relatives inside. "They love you, Coralie," she said, soft but clear. "But they love the version of you that doesn't ask for anything." I remember nodding, even smiling as if that truth didn't sting. I closed the memory like a drawer, then stood up and walked to the kitchen. It was time to make a list, not of what I was missing, but of who had seen me all along. The house was mine, finally. A white, clapboard farmhouse tucked at the edge of the Hudson Valley, surrounded by turning maples and the quiet kind of land that doesn't ask anything from you. I'd closed on it in August after 6 years of saving, running the math 100 different ways until I could make it work. The plan had always been spring, time to furnish to ease into it, but something about being told to sit this one out had flipped a switch. If they didn't want me at their table, maybe I didn't need to be there. Maybe I could build one of my own. The idea started slowly, an idle sketch on the back of a receipt, a half-drafted email to Aunt Judith, a call to the neighbor who watched the property. But then it took on shape. A guest list, a menu, a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. I texted my cousins Theo and Elise, the ones who always remembered my birthday, even when my parents didn't. They both said yes within minutes. Aunt Judith replied with 3 words, "Say when, sweetheart." Then there was Malcolm, my childhood friend, who once drove 3 hours to fix a flat tire I didn't even ask for help with. He answered my invitation with a photo of a pie dish and the words, "I'm bringing 2." I made the list longer than I expected. Co-workers, neighbors, people who'd stood beside me during breakups, promotions, that awful year when I lost my lease and kept showing up anyway. This wasn't about proving anything. Not anymore. I wasn't trying to outshine my parents or teach them a lesson. I just wanted something different, something honest. Still, one name stayed on the edge of the page. Taryn, or maybe more accurately, Emma and Jonah, her kids. I loved them. They didn't ask for the roles we were cast in, but inviting them felt like letting the past sneak in the side door. In therapy that week, I asked Dr. Hess if I was sabotaging my piece by considering it. "You don't have to burn the old house down," she said, leaning back in her chair. "You can just stop living in it." I wrote Taryn's name in pencil and underlined it twice. Not a decision. A maybe. Back at the house, I cleared off the long wooden table that came with the place. It seated 12. I ran my fingers across the grain and imagined filling it, glasses, clinking voices, rising kids laughing from the next room. I wasn't planning an escape. I was planting something, and for the first time in years, I wanted to stay. The responses came in faster than I'd anticipated, quick, heartfelt yeses from nearly everyone I reached out to. Elise booked her train ticket from Boston within hours. Theo asked if he could bring his partner Clara and their rescue dog. Aunt Judith said she'd be driving up early to help cook and make sure no one tries to bring boxed stuffing. Even Malcolm sent me a Spotify playlist labeled Jensen's First Annual Reclamation Dinner. I mapped out sleeping arrangements like a puzzle, moved beds, ordered extra linens, turned the sunroom into a bunk space for the kids. I planned meals with color-coded lists, one column for ingredients, another for who would cook what. I even printed out instructions for a scavenger hunt just in case the younger guests got restless. There was something sacred about the rhythm of it all, folding napkins, testing wine pairings, learning how to pronounce gratin dauphinois from YouTube videos. For once, I wasn't preparing for approval. I was preparing for welcome. Then came the message. "Travis, hey, can we talk for a second?" I stared at the screen. We'd never texted before. Not directly. Curious, I called. "Hey," he said, sounding uncertain. "I hope this isn't crossing a line." There was a pause, one that held more than small talk. "Taryn doesn't know I'm reaching out," he admitted. "Things have been a lot lately. She's stressed the kids are picking up on it. And when I heard from Elise that you're doing something different this year," he trailed off. I waited. "I guess I just wanted to ask, is there a place for us too?" The question sat between us heavier than I expected. My first instinct was no. Not out of bitterness, but protection. For once, I had built something that didn't center around Taryn, didn't bend around her moods or needs. Letting them in felt like opening a gate that I had finally learned how to lock. But then I thought of Emma's gap-toothed smile, Jonah's dinosaur drawings, the way Travis always seemed quietly aware of how skewed the family scales had been. "I haven't decided," I said finally. "I need to think about it. I'm trying to do this differently. I want to make sure it still feels like mine." "Fair," he said gently. "And for what it's worth, thank you for even considering it." After we hung up, I stood in the middle of my kitchen phone, still warm in my palm. I looked around at the baskets of linens, the folding chairs stacked by the door, the playlist humming low through the speakers. There was room, physically at least. I just wasn't sure if I had enough space in me. I called Travis the next morning. I didn't want to leave it open-ended. I needed clarity, his and mine. "I've thought about it," I said, not waiting for small talk. "You're welcome to come, but it has to be different." He didn't speak, so I continued. "This house, this table, it's mine. I built this space so I wouldn't have to shrink anymore. So if you come, it's not to replay old roles. It's not so Taryn can take center stage again without noticing who she's stepping over. If she's coming, she needs to understand that." There was a pause, then his voice low and sincere. "I understand. And I'll make sure she does too. Honestly, I think this might be good for her. For all of us." I believed him not because he promised anything, but because he didn't try to smooth it over. He accepted my terms without flinching. That mattered. After we hung up, I stared at my phone for a moment longer, resisting the urge to scroll back through old texts. But it didn't matter. The latest one had just arrived, from my mother. "Hey, sweetheart. Just confirming what time is Taryn's family arriving on Thursday. No, are you coming? No, will we see you there?" Just the assumption that I was out of the frame like always. I didn't reply. I let the silence hold. Because this year I wasn't going to explain my absence. I wasn't going to offer context to people who never asked for it when I was present. I wasn't going to fight for a place in a story that only saw me when I was useful. Let them set the table without me. I had my own to prepare. That evening, I folded linen napkins with deliberate care, setting them beside mismatched plates I'd collected from flea markets over the years. Each one different, each one chosen. I labeled place cards and wrote names slowly. Malcolm, Elise, Aunt Judith, Theo, Clara. Then, hesitating only for a second, I added 4 more. Travis, Taryn, Emma, Jonah. I stacked the cards neatly and tucked them into the drawer just beneath the printed menu. There was still time and plenty left to do, but my seat at this table was already claimed. By noon, the gravel drive had become a carousel of headlights and laughter. Cars rolled in with back seats packed tight pillows, pie tins, board games, bottles of wine. Hugs landed fast and familiar. Scarves were flung on hooks, shoes kicked off at the door. The kitchen filled first, of course. That's where everything good begins. Elise brought a sweet potato dish that was still warm. Malcolm came bearing 2 pies and a playlist labeled Soft Autumn Comeback. Aunt Judith unpacked a tote bag of sharp opinions and hand-pressed cider. Theo and Clara arrived with their dog and an apology for the fur already coating their sweaters. No one asked what time dinner would start. No one watched the clock or waited for a cue. They drifted in and out of rooms helping themselves to coffee and company. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and real had been missing for a long time. I had just finished arranging the table settings when I heard a car crunch up the drive. I didn't move right away. I let the moment stretch. Then Emma's voice high and clear. Auntie Cor. She tumbled out of the back seat with Jonah close behind both kids, barreling through fallen leaves and into my arms. I knelt to hug them, letting their excitement wash over the nerves I hadn't admitted I had. When I looked up, Taryn was standing a few steps behind, holding the car door like it might keep her steady. Her eyes scanned the house, the porch, me. "This is beautiful," she said quietly. I nodded. "I'm glad you came." She stepped forward almost cautiously. "Thank you for having us." It wasn't an apology, it wasn't an explanation, but it wasn't nothing. I held the door open and let them in. The table filled slowly like water rising in a glass. Voices layered over one another, stories, laughter, inside jokes that hadn't aged a day. The food was imperfect, but full of intention, a patchwork of recipes and borrowed spices. Clara's mushroom stuffing collapsed in the middle. Aunt Judith called it rustic. We all agreed that was better anyway. I sat at the head of the table, wineglass in hand, watching it all unfold. The warmth wasn't just from the fire or the food. It came from being known. No performance, no spotlight to chase or avoid, just people who saw me. Across from me, Taryn was quieter than usual. She hadn't said much since they arrived, but she listened. I caught her watching me, watching the way Theo asked for my opinion on the wine pairing, the way Emma leaned against my shoulder without hesitation, the way Aunt Judith kept saying, "Coralie, remember that time," as if the memories belonged to both of us. She was seeing something, and for once, she didn't seem to be comparing it to herself. Halfway through dessert, my phone buzzed. Then Malcolm's, then Theo's. A ripple of alerts moved down the table. Taryn glanced at her phone and went pale. "It's Mom." No one moved. She looked at me. I nodded once. Taryn answered and set the phone in the center of the table on speaker. "Hi, Mom." "Taryn, where are you?" "We've been calling all afternoon. Dinner's ruined. Your father's upset. We thought you were coming." "We're at Coralie's," Taryn said simply. There was a beat of stunned silence on the line. Then our mother's voice, sharp and thin. "Coralie's, but she's not in Boston." "I'm here," I said, leaning forward slightly. "In my home, with everyone who chose to be here." Another silence. "You told me to skip Thanksgiving," I added. "You wanted space, so we gave you a continent." The call ended before I could say anything else. Taryn didn't say a word, but she reached for the pie server and passed it to me without a single question. The house was quiet, filled with the hush that follows laughter. The fire had gone out sometime in the night, but the scent of wood smoke lingered. I stood at the stove, warming croissants from the village bakery, listening to the hum of the kettle. Taryn wandered in still in her sweatshirt and slippers. She didn't say anything at first, just poured herself coffee and sat at the end of the table where the centerpiece had wilted slightly overnight. "They've been calling everyone," she said. "Theo, Aunt Judith, even Malcolm. I think they're hoping someone will explain it for them." I didn't answer. The butter knife scraped quietly as I split a croissant in half. "You were right," she said after a minute. I knew it. I just didn't want to risk losing what I got. I looked at her. She wasn't defensive, just honest. "I think we both lost something," I said. "But maybe we can build differently now." She nodded, not quickly, but with weight. Jonah's footsteps thudded upstairs, followed by Emma's giggle. Taryn smiled toward the ceiling. "They love it here." I smiled too. So do I. We sat in silence a little longer, letting it stretch without needing to fix it. Then I stood to set the table again. Taryn sat beside me on the couch when I called. I put the phone on speaker before it rang. Mom answered first, Cassandra, finally. We've been trying to understand what happened. I know I said, that's why I'm calling now. There was a shuffle. Then Dad's voice joined hers. We just want to clear the air. I didn't speak to defend or accuse. I told them the truth. How it felt to be asked to step aside for peace. How it echoed years of being overlooked, minimized, softened into the background. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask them to apologize. I just named it. There was a long pause afterward, the kind where no one knows what to fix first. We didn't mean to hurt you, Mom said eventually. We've never really seen it that way. I know I said, that's part of the problem. And then something shifted. My father asked how the house was. My mother asked what I'd been working on lately. They didn't change the subject. They didn't pivot to Taryn. They stayed with me. It didn't solve everything, but it was something. Before we hung up, I said quietly, next year. If you're ready to see the whole version of me, not just the parts that fit into your comfort, you're welcome here. They didn't answer right away, but they didn't say no. After I ended the call, I sat still for a moment, letting the stillness settle. Then I reached for the guest list tucked beneath the fruit bowl and wrote one more line. 1 year later, the house looked the same, but felt fuller. The same long table, the same mismatched plates, just more hands helping set them. Familiar laughter echoed through the hallways, layered now with new voices and second chances. My parents arrived late morning. No grand entrance, no assumptions. Just the quiet humility of people learning how to enter a space they didn't create. Mom took it all in candles, flickering cousins, stirring cranberry sauce, Emma helping Jonah fold napkins. She stood beside me in the kitchen holding a dish of roasted carrots. This is extraordinary, she said. I'm proud of you. I nodded soft and steady. I didn't need the words anymore, but I still let them land. Later, as we gathered around the table and the room warmed with conversation, I looked at the faces that had shown up not because of obligation, but because they wanted to be here. I realized the foundation had shifted. This wasn't a reclamation anymore. It was a creation. Sometimes the deepest love isn't inherited, it's chosen. And rebuilt? I hadn't been home in 2 Christmases. Last year I told them I was traveling. The year before that I just didn't reply. But this year I told myself maybe something had softened. Claire had lost her job, her husband, and most of that charm she used to walk through life with like a shield. I figured maybe things had changed. Or maybe I just wanted to see if anyone noticed I was still around. I arrived late, just as the kids were opening their 3rd round of gifts. Same living room, same artificial tree, same fireplace garland we'd had since '95. The stocking with my name was still there in gold glitter tucked behind a plant like someone had forgotten to take it down or didn't want it seen. I waited until Claire had finished unwrapping her cheese board custom-etched courtesy of Mom. Then I stepped forward and handed her the envelope. It wasn't fancy. No ribbon, no card. Just white paper sealed clean. Inside was a receipt and $147 in cash, 3 months' rent already paid. I'd called her landlord the week before, quietly. No big gesture. I thought she'd understand. She peeled the flap open like it was junk mail and pulled the bills out, slow fingers grazing the receipt. For a second, she just blinked. Then she smiled wide, sharp. One of those old Claire smiles she used to wear like armor back in high school. "Oh, wow," she said loudly, raising the envelope. "Looks like someone's trying to buy her way back into the family." The laughter came fast. Full, rich, like champagne popping. Uncle Dan clapped his knee. Mom gave that tight little laugh she always did when Claire landed a zinger. Dad just leaned back, took a long sip of his beer. No one asked what was inside. No one said thank you. No one even looked at me. I reached forward, pulled the envelope back from her hand without saying a word, and slid it into my coat pocket. Good to know, I said. The room went silent briefly. Claire blinked. Mom's smile faltered, but no one stood up. No one followed when I stepped outside and let the cold slap the heat off my face. It didn't start with a big fight. There was no door slammed, no declaration that I didn't belong. The silence came quiet, like a leak in the ceiling you don't notice until the drywall buckles. I was 15 the first time I realized Mom didn't include my name when she talked about the girls. It was always Claire's choir performance, Claire's grades, Claire's dress for homecoming. Not once did she mention that I'd placed first in the district math competition. Not once did she say I was the one who repainted the porch when Dad slipped a disc and couldn't climb the ladder. I was the quiet one, the steady one. The girl who fixed the router without being asked, who made her own lunch through middle school, who gave Claire her last $20 before senior prom and never asked for it back. When Claire didn't get into Duke, Mom cried for a week. I remember the exact sentence she deserved so much more. When I got into Purdue on a full scholarship, she said, "That's nice. At least you'll be close." I chose the dorms anyway. By the time I graduated, Claire had married Mason, the kind of man who called waitresses sweetheart and got louder when he drank. Big backyard wedding, white tent, string lights. I folded napkins with Aunt Doreen while Claire posed for photos. I wasn't in the bridal party. I wasn't even allowed a +1. Space is tight, Mom had said. The divorce came 2 years later. No one talked about why. Just that he never appreciated her. I knew things. I'd heard the voicemails, the fights that blurred through my phone speaker at midnight, but I never said a word. That's what I was good at, not making things worse. Then Mom needed outpatient surgery, something routine. I drove 3 hours north after leaving work early, thinking maybe this was a moment I could be useful. When I walked into the waiting room, Claire was already there, latte in hand, surrounded by Mom's friends. She looked me up and down, then turned back to her story without a word. That same visit, Dad let it slip. Claire had moved into the little unit behind the house. "She's getting back on her feet," he said, like she was conquering Everest. I offered to help with the medical bill. He smiled, said Claire already took care of it. I sent a check anyway. From there, it got quiet. I wasn't on the invite list for Dad's retirement party. I wasn't part of the group text when they sold Grandma's piano. One day, I saw that Mom had updated her Facebook profile to a beach photo, just her and Claire. I left a comment. "Looks like fun." It disappeared within the hour. That was when I stopped asking to be included, but I didn't stop showing up. I still Venmo'd Mom for her prescriptions, still sent Santa gift cards to Claire's kids, still helped when Dad fell and needed someone to patch the handrail. I was never asked, but I came. Like the extra chair no one pulls out, but never puts away either. Austin wasn't a plan. It was a job listing and an opening I didn't talk myself out of. I packed 2 suitcases and a second-hand laptop and took the train down. My first apartment was a 3rd-floor walk-up over a vape shop. The blinds cracked when you touched them. The stove hissed every time it lit. But it was mine. Quiet. Predictable. No one barged in. No one asked why I'd gone. The job was solid legal compliance for infrastructure grants. Mostly I spent days buried in state code and audit trails. I learned how to speak in clauses and subclauses, how to notice missing signatures faster than names. Promotions came without fanfare, just a new line under my email signature. I didn't mind. I never liked clapping. Mom would text every so often. Just things like "hope you're staying warm" or "saw Austin got rain." But when her pharmacy bill went up, she'd forward the PDF without a word. I'd pay it. Same for Dad's tires. Same for Claire's broken phone when she was job hunting. One time, I mistyped my PIN and paused a transfer. She called within the hour. First time she'd used my number in nearly a year. I told myself it was easier that way. Distance made things quieter, and I had my own rhythm now. Morning walks, grocery lists, a neighbor who always said hello and meant it. Then Ryan showed up. We were paired on a risk compliance report, bridges, weight limits, paperwork no one wanted. He wore rolled-up sleeves and swore at spreadsheets like they were old enemies. On the second day, he brought me coffee without asking how I took it. Just said, figured it couldn't hurt. It didn't. He had a rescue dog named June and parents who lived 20 minutes out. When he asked me to Sunday dinner, I said yes before I thought of a reason not to. They weren't extraordinary, just kind. His mom made banana pudding from scratch. His dad told slow jokes and offered second helpings. No one asked if I was married. No one asked where I'd been. They asked if I liked green beans, if I wanted the end piece of the meatloaf. I did. The email wasn't meant for me. I knew that the second it landed, subject line, too formal, too polished. Family property planning next steps. I clicked before I could think twice. It was a forward, probably by mistake. A thread between mama lawyer I didn't recognize and a title company. Buried in the back and forth was a sentence that stopped everything. Finalize quitclaim language Claire listed as sole occupant of the carriage unit. My name wasn't in the CC. It wasn't anywhere. Not as a co-owner. Not even as someone to be notified. I scrolled back up, reread it. The carriage unit. The little cedar house behind our family home. The one Grandpa Ray built after retirement with his own hands. The one he said was for the girls when the world gets loud. His words. I still remembered them. On my 19th birthday, he gave me a key, wrapped it in a flannel handkerchief, said, "Just so you know, Evie, you always have somewhere to land." I'd kept that key. It was still on a ring I never used. Now they were quietly finalizing paperwork to give the whole place to Claire. Like I'd never stepped foot there. Like I didn't exist. I didn't reply. I didn't call to ask what it meant. I opened my documents folder instead. Searched through every file I'd kept since Grandpa passed. Insurance paperwork, probate filings, copies of the original deed. And then I saw it something I barely remembered, signing temporary authorization for medical proxy. Dated 6 months before Grandpa's stroke. Meant for picking up prescriptions, signing him in for lab work. But the version attached to the email had something else. A second page. A quiet, convenient clause. In the event of the signer's absence or disinterest, remaining property may be reassigned. Below it, my name. Digitally typed, and a signature I didn't recognize. Slanted too round. Not mine. I sat still for a long time. Not angry, at least not in the usual way. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that sits in the lungs and makes it hard to breathe. I printed the form. Stapled it to the original I had. Circled the differences. That night, I didn't eat dinner, didn't call Ryan, just walked 2 blocks under a street lamp hum and back the folder tucked under my arm. What stung most wasn't the house. It was how easy it was to remove me. All it took was a form, and no one thought I'd notice. I drove up the next morning. No music, just road noise and 1 bottle of water I didn't touch. The little town hadn't changed. Same grain elevator, same gas station with the busted pump cover, same front porches sagging under time and weather. Mr. Harris still lived 2 doors down from where Grandpa Ray used to sit on the swing and call across the yard. He recognized me before I stepped out of the car. "Evelyn Cooper," he said, nodding once. "Knew you'd come eventually." I didn't ask how. He led me to the garage, past the workbench, still cluttered with old paint cans and coffee tins full of screws. From the top shelf, he pulled down a metal box, gray dented at the corner, the kind Grandpa used to keep spare keys and half-finished crossword books in. "He gave me this the week before his last hospital visit," Mr. Harris said, setting it on the table. "Said it was for you. Just didn't know when you'd want it." Inside was a folded flannel handkerchief, faded red plaid. I knew it immediately. Wrapped inside the original key. Not the spare. Not a copy. His key. On a worn brass ring. Beneath it, a stack of envelopes, photos, a note in Grandpa's blocky handwriting. "In case Evelyn ever doubts it, this is hers too." The photos were small matte prints from an old roll-me painting the porch, sitting beside him at the VA clinic helping him cut wood for winter. In one, he's looking at me instead of the camera. The kind of look you don't get by accident. Tucked in the bottom, a page torn from a yellow legal pad. No legal stamp, no notarization, just a line that read, "If the girls ever divide the house, Evelyn has first say on how." She earned that much. No one else had seen this. No one else needed to. I drove back that night without calling anyone. Didn't mention the box. Didn't forward the email. I just sat at my kitchen table and let the quiet settle around me, solid and low. There it was, proof that I hadn't imagined the way he looked at me or the way I'd been erased. I hadn't disappeared. They'd covered me up. I parked across from the steakhouse 20 minutes early. It was one of those chain places they liked, casual but dimly lit enough to pretend it was private. Through the front windows, I saw Dad helping Mom out of the car, her coat still too thin for March. Claire trailed behind Blazer Sharp Lipstick Sharper. They walked in smiling. I waited 5 more minutes, then got out. Folder in hand, coat zipped high. When I reached the host stand, the girl smiled like she didn't know what to do with me. "I'm with the Cooper party," I said. She blinked. "Oh, right this way. They weren't expecting me." When I approached the table, the shift in the air was instant. Mom's smile froze before it finished forming. Dad sat straighter. Claire just stared like I'd walked in carrying a grenade. I didn't sit. "Hey," I said, calm as I could. "Just here to listen." No one moved. So I pulled out the empty chair next to Claire, the one they hadn't set. She cleared her throat. "This is kind of a private meeting." "I know." I set the folder on the table. "That's why I brought facts." Dad reached for it first. His brow furrowed before he'd turned 2 pages. Mom glanced at him, then at me. Said my name, but softer this time. "I didn't come to argue," I said. "I just came to say I never signed that form. Not the one that gave Claire the house. Not the one that gave you the right to erase my name." Claire reached for the folder, but I put my hand on it. "You can read it after lunch," I said. "I just wanted you to see that I still exist. On paper. In memory." Silence. Dad set the folder down gently. Mom looked away. "I'm not here for a fight," I said again. "This isn't a scene. It's just a correction." I stood, slid the chair back without scraping the floor. "I won't stay." They didn't stop me. No one asked where I was going, but I could feel them watching me the whole way out like the air hadn't settled behind me yet. I thought that would be it. That I'd laid the truth on the table and they'd do what they always did. Close ranks revise the story, turn it into something easier to carry. But 2 days later, I got a message from Claire. Subject line, "Can we talk? Not to fight, just to understand." There was a number underneath. New. I saved it without thinking. Called that afternoon. She answered on the first ring. No hello. Just, "Why didn't you say something sooner? I didn't know how to answer that." She filled the silence herself. "I didn't even know there was a form," she said. Mom handled it. "Of course she did," I said quieter than I meant to. "Do you remember what Grandpa said about the house?" She paused. That we'd always have somewhere to land. That it was for both of us. I waited. Let the words stretch. He didn't want us to fight over it. And yet I said somebody wrote the ending ahead of us. She didn't argue. "We're meeting again on Sunday," she said. Same place. "Can you come?" I could have said no. But I didn't. This time when I arrived, they'd set a place for me. No warm welcome. No outstretched arms. Just a 4th chair, clean napkin water already poured. I took that as a kind of offering. I sat without asking. No one spoke right away. Dad had the folder in front of him, mine returned with the pages still in order. Claire stared at it like it might disappear. Mom kept her eyes on the butter knife. Eventually, she cleared her throat. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she said. "Claire had just lost the baby. She was in pieces. You were far away. We didn't know if you'd even come back." I didn't interrupt. I signed the form. She continued. "I know I shouldn't have. But I figured it didn't matter. That you weren't interested in any of it anymore." I looked at her steady. "You figured wrong." She nodded slowly. "I see that now." Claire glanced between us. "What do we do?" Dad spoke then, the first time since I'd sat down. "We can amend the trust," he said. "Have it corrected legally. Acknowledge the co-ownership. No one's contesting anything." He looked directly at me. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have checked." I didn't expect him to say that. Not because he wasn't capable, but because it had never occurred to him that he needed to. "I'm not here to reclaim property," I said. "You can keep the structure. I just want the name restored. Officially. Permanently." Another pause. Then Claire asked the question I'd been bracing for. Why now? There it was. The real question. I took a breath. "I'm not asking to be part of the family," I said. "I just want to make sure that when people look back, they don't see a version of this story where I never existed." No one replied right away. Then, Mom reached into her purse, pulled out something small. "I found this when we were cleaning the guest room," she said. I think it was yours. She handed it across the table. A birthday card. My handwriting. Postmarked 4 years ago. Addressed to Claire's daughter. Never opened. I didn't even know this came, Claire whispered. I put it aside, Mom said quietly. It was a rough year. Then I forgot. The word hung there, forgot, like something sour in the throat. I folded the card, slid it into my coat pocket. I won't drag this out, I said, standing. I didn't come here to settle scores. Claire rose too. Are you leaving again? I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't smug this time. Just tired. I never stopped leaving, I said. I just finally noticed. Then I walked out. The drive back to Austin was quiet. Ryan didn't ask questions. He never did unless I looked like I wanted to talk. That was something I'd come to love about him, his ability to be present without filling the space. We stopped once at a roadside diner with chipped Formica tables and watery coffee. I didn't say much. Just ate my sandwich and stared out the window watching 2 crows pick at a napkin near the curb. When we got home, I dropped my bag by the door and stood there longer than I meant to. Ryan set his keys down, looked at me. I'll start a load of laundry, he offered. I nodded but didn't move. I don't know what I thought I'd feel. Not peace exactly, not closure. Maybe something louder, a final word, a cracking open. What I got instead was the hush that follows after something long overdue has finally settled. That night, I pulled out the tin box from under the bed, the one Mr. Harris had given me. Inside were the pictures, the letter from Grandpa, the old key. I placed the birthday card next to them, the one Claire never saw, the one Mom forgot. Not as a wound. Just as record. A thread I wasn't following anymore. I didn't call after that. No check-ins. No holiday texts. And they didn't call me either. I think on some level we all understood the chapter had closed. Not with fireworks, not with forgiveness. Just finality. 2 months later, Ryan's mom invited us to her birthday. I asked what I could bring. She said, "Do you know how to make cornbread?" "Not really," I admitted. She smiled. "Well, you're about to." That afternoon, elbows dusted in flour, I felt something I hadn't in years, belonging without bargaining. No tally, no keeping score. Just a seat at the counter and someone happy I was in it. A few days later, I came home to find Ryan hanging a small frame by the front door. It was a photo he'd taken me sitting on the porch, coffee mug in hand eyes, squinting into the sun. "I didn't even know you took that," I said. "I like it," he replied. "You look like you're home." I stared at it longer than I meant to, because I hadn't used that word, not out loud, not even in my head, in a very long time. But maybe that's what it was. Not that I'd been cut out, but that I'd finally stepped out and stayed out. And I didn't miss the wait. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. I found it tucked between a flyer for window replacements and a coupon for dog food we didn't use. The envelope was pale blue, thicker than usual, my name written in my mother's careful old-fashioned script, the kind she only used for holiday cards and condolences. No return address, no stickers. Just that handwriting, unmistakable, unmistakably hers. I held it for a long time, not because I didn't know what was inside, but because I did. Or thought I did. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was a justification. Or worse, something in between. I didn't open it. I didn't tear it up either. I just placed it gently in the tin box next to Grandpa's note, the photos, the card Claire never saw, and the folded handkerchief that once held a key. I shut the lid. The soft click felt final, but not harsh. Some people leave by slamming doors. Others leave by no longer knocking. I was the latter. And maybe that's why they remember me now, not because I raised my voice or demanded to be seen, but because I finally stopped showing up in the places they'd learned to look past me. There's no great moral to this, no last conversation that tied everything in a bow. What I needed wasn't forgiveness or clarity. What I needed was distance and a nameplate on the front door that no one else picked for me. Ryan asked if I wanted to go somewhere that weekend, maybe out of town. I said no. I just wanted to stay home. That word again, home. It's quieter than I expected. There are still nights when I remember the envelope, the way Claire laughed, the way Mom didn't stop her. But it feels further back now. Like a bruise that's faded to the kind of mark you only find if you press. And I don't press. Not anymore. If you've ever stopped knocking, just leave a dot. You don't have to say more. I'll know what it means.